I've been a musician my whole life. At that time, after my school, actually, I was gonna be a pianist, classical trained. I'm a classical trained pianist, so I was gonna leave Japan to study piano somewhere else. and but I had this hobby, writing songs and sing. So I asked my teacher, piano coach, that is it okay to continue my hobby in the dormitory I go to, you know? I thought every student in the dormitory is going to be like really serious, you know, piano students. So I thought maybe they weren't gonna, you know, let me sing or play around. And then she said, why don't you sing in front of me? Because I never did before in front of my teacher. So I did. I sang my original song, and then she said, oh my gosh, you are expressing your feelings much more now than when you are playing Beethoven. And then we were already talking about like getting a passport and everything. My parents were right there. And they were like, oh my gosh, Mari's life is now changing. And so right after that, I decided to make a demo tape. And I sent out like a few, like only 4 or 5 tapes. And it ended up being at the JVC Victor, which I never sent my demo tape to. And the director from that company decided to sign me as a singer-songwriter. And at the same time, JVC was looking for a person who could play Rin Minmei because Minmei is a singer. So somebody needed to sing and also play the role. And actually, the day that I was at the building, the next day that I was at the building was the last audition for the Minmei role. So they sent me there. I sang a couple of original songs and read a few lines. There were 2 other girls. Looked like they were actors, serious actors. But a week later, they called me and, you are Minmei. So I was really surprised, and actually I didn't know what waited for me after that. My life changed.
覗くなよ。
I don't remember that somebody described the character to me. I was almost being myself playing Minmei. Age-wise, I was really close to her age. And my co-star, the guy who played Hikaru, he was still a high school student also. I was a college student. So I just tried to use my own emotion and stuff from my heart.
これ一人乗りでしょ？
いいじゃない。さあ乗って。
うん。
これかぶって。オタクヘルメットをまっすぐかぶれないの？
Some people warned me, if you do this, you're gonna be known as Minmei forever. Are you sure? And those people, I kind of had to, I had to make a choice. Like, do I wanna listen to these people and follow these people and become a team, or I'm gonna grab some new hands to start brand new something. And I decided to take a chance to get this Macros. The studio was called Abacus Studio. I'm sure it's still there. Like I took a train for about like 25 minutes to get there from my dormitory. And studio was a very comfortable feeling. The actors, we all got together and sat in the studio all together and waited for our turns.
あれミンミーちゃんやないか。
長会長さん。
Big screen in front of us. Sometimes there are pictures. Sometimes just a little pencil drawing. Sometimes just a line, pencil line. Shh. And that was the sign for us to speak up. Honda-san, Mr. Honda, he was the director. He was wearing black framed glasses and looked very smart. And he was very funny, tried to make all of us very comfortable, and a lot of laughing and no dissing.
あなたね、冗談も時と場合を考
クロ
え
ディア君
We record one episode, and next week or end of that week, we see the show. And then we were like, oh, good. Actually, they drew it. The picture, yay. It was on Sunday at 2 p.m. every Sunday. So I think that the family watched it after they finished lunch. So Macross was maybe famous and popular with all age range of people.
記念写真撮っとこうか。
うん私写真写り悪いから
そんなことないさ。さあこっちへ来て。カメラ。さあ並んで。
The most memorable person for me is the person who played Hikaru. Sorry, I'm a little choked up. His name is Arihiro Hase, and he was a high school student when he started to do the macros, and I was a college student. So we were both students, and he often came in the studio in a uniform, school uniform. So he was like a little brother to me. And we always talked. And after I debuted as a singer-songwriter, he always came to my show and supported me, brought beautiful flowers every time. And it doesn't mean that we were talking on the phone every day or anything, but we were close. But suddenly he passed away, and it was a big shock to me. I was actually in Tokyo doing my concerts when I heard that news, so I could attend his funeral. So that was really fortunate for me. But now I'm a very good friend of his mom, and she always comes to my show. After the show, she comes to the backstage. She's always tearful seeing me, remembers her own son, and so I try to cheer her up. Maybe that's not the right word, but be close to her, to be with her. Sometimes I send some cute dolls, some gift.
Oh, 僕なんかが相手でいいの？
He is still very close to my heart, and when I am recording this new macros in the studio, sometimes I feel his spirit right next to me, so I almost dedicating this series to him. The actress who played Claudia, I don't know how you pronounce that name in America, but Claudia, she's a very veteran, experienced actor. One time I was having a hard time delivering this screaming sound.
またかよ。浮かんでるもんにいちいち驚いてたんじゃ。
Suddenly she pushed me from back, like I didn't know she was coming. Bam! And then I was like, ah! And she said, that's it. That's what you need to do. And after that, I felt really comfortable, or I felt easy to deliver those screaming voices or act scared, you know. So it was a little thing, but a big effect. I can still say that I was not quite an actor at that time yet, comparing to now, but I tried my best.
午前0時の鐘が鳴れば
in the fourth episode, there's a scene that I kind of start singing naturally, and Hikaru's listening to it, and the director asked me to sing something beautiful, gentle. So I thought about it for a second, and I sang this song called Cinderella, which I wrote when I was 16, and it, I think, perfectly fit in the scene.
振り切るように駆け下りた階段の上ガラスの靴
It's a love song. I was 16. I'm sorry. I was emotionally in love with somebody that I couldn't have. Am I talking too much? And I was sad, but at the same time, that was my first love. Platonic love, but it was, to me, serious because I really liked him. So it's a little sad. I think that I wrote my feelings for him as Cinderella because I felt like there was a limit to this love situation. So I felt like it was the same situation that Cinderella had to go back to herself at midnight.
いい声してるんだね。
これでも中学の頃は歌のレッスンしてたのよ
I recorded those Macros songs in the studio, Victor Studio. I don't remember I had a lot of time to learn the songs. I think I went to the studio almost like directly and started to sing. At that time, I was singing really high-pitched songs anyway, so I didn't have a hard time.
青い大空ラブサイン I love you, you love me
That was the first time I recorded anything in the music studio, recording studio. So when I first heard my voice through the headphones, I was kind of surprised that, wow, it's so clean and clear. And I just enjoyed that moment very much.
I think it was about a month ago or so that I was told we would be doing Macross, and so I jumped at it.
In the year 1999, a huge object fell from the heavens. A gigantic space battleship over 1,200 meters in length.
We didn't have any scripts at that time. I just had the DVD. I popped it in and started listening to it, and I realized about halfway through the very beginning narration that I was going to need more of a backstory, more information. So I immediately just stopped. Didn't even try tackling any translation, and just got online, did a lot of research. This story is so huge. I mean, it's 36 episodes, and there's all these characters and all these mecha and all this massive history. I figured I had to sit down and take a look at that first, so that's what I did. If I don't understand the story, I could mistranslate something, misinterpret something. So it was very important for me to do that research first.
Thank goodness.
There were a couple almost sort of fanatical Japanese websites that really helped me out. Listed a lot of the characters and the mecha and whatnot. And the original Animego release had these liner notes by a man named Egan Liu, and so Googling his name turned up very quickly a very extensive website called the Macross Compendium that also was very useful for me in figuring out this terminology in English.
やがて長く苦しい統合戦争も終わり
And the
地球は
Earth was
平和を
once
取り
again
戻
at
した
peace. The alien battleship, rebuilt by human hands, was given a new name with which to start its new life. The Macross.
Well, initially our goal wasn't to retranslate Macross because it had already been translated. Initially I was brought on board to analyze that translation and just to verify the accuracy of it. What had happened, though, was I found that as I went through the translation, there were a few issues that I thought could use addressing. And as I began to address those issues, I found that more and more of them were, I was seeing more and more of them, everything from slight misinterpretations to problems with accuracy to misheard lines. Truthfully, I don't think of myself as the project translator. I would like to think of myself as the project editor. Sometimes the editing process will be simply changing a few lines. Sometimes it will be completely rewriting from start to finish. In my case, I read the Japanese and I hear the Japanese, and two things happen. I mean, I process the words themselves, and I process the feel of the words. You know, how does it sound? How is it delivered? What is the emotional content of the words? And so there's that process. And then I guess almost instantaneously, you know, like when you read a book in English, you hear the words in your head. Well, that's what happens with me. I process the Japanese and I just hear the English in my head, so I just type it out. There are some instances where it just doesn't cross over. For example, like idioms. I mean, that's the same in English or as in Japanese. I mean, I remember when I was living in Japan, I used to sort of laboriously try and translate some of my favorite idioms into English, you know. He doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. And I just met with these blank stares, and they're like, what is the hole? Is he going to go to the bathroom in the hole? I'm like, no, he doesn't know the difference. He can't. And it just was completely lost on them. And the same thing goes from Japanese to English. Some idioms just don't translate. Another thing is just simply cultural concepts, or you say a word and you can translate it literally, but the word has another meaning altogether in context. I think an example of this is in episode 6. You have a character who says something that, you know, literally would be translated as sorry.
ごめんね
My translation was thanks, and the reason for this is it's very much part of the Japanese culture that's built into the language. I mean, when somebody does something and you want to thank them for it, lots of times Japanese will say, I'm sorry. I mean, you can go to a restaurant, somebody brings something for you, and you'll say, sorry. They mean thank you. It's just sort of a cultural thing, like, you know, sorry for making you go out of your way, and I thank you for it.
But this is me you're talking about.
Well, thanks,
You know, if you want to look at the culture of Japan, they have a very highly stratified society with clear delineations between who is at what level, quote unquote, and there were the requisite grammatical forms to reflect that.
Is that you, Hikaru?
I know that voice! Senpai! It's been a while!
You actually find this in Macross. We have the character of Hikaru who constantly calls Roy Fokker, calls him senpai, which is, well, you know, one of the hallmarks of the Japanese culture is the senpai-kohai, or, you know, senior-junior relationship, and as a sign of respect. I don't think Hikaru ever calls Roy, he calls him senpai, and so it was chosen to keep that intact.
Damn it! Hey! Get the hell out of here!
The issue of translating Japanese curse words into English is really kind of a mixed bag, I think, simply because this is a perfect instance of where you can't necessarily take words at their face value. You know, in English, you have this wide variety of curse words at our disposal, and if I say, you know, hey f you, buddy, I mean, it cannot be interpreted any other way. But in Japanese, a lot of it is contextual.
Hikaru! Shit!
I mean, you have a word, one of the most often used curse words there is kuso, which literally means shit. But I mean, it doesn't always mean shit. And a perfect example of this is the fact that cartoon characters will say this word. I used to ride the subway, and there was this great little poster that was up on the side of the train, and it had this lady. It was like, you know, the many faces of the average office worker, and it showed her, you know, vexed and, you know, frustrated and overworked. And in one, she's going kuso, which again literally means shit. But in this case, it's more sort of a vexed, oh man, oh gosh. So it's all contextual. You know, if I curse under my breath, it might not necessarily mean shit. But if I point to you and say, but most definitely. So I think you'll find that if you really want to sort of keep an ear out for the way that certain words are translated within Macross, you'll find that A isn't necessarily always B, depending upon the forcefulness and the context. So a lot of that is contextual.
What planet is that?
The fifth planetary body counting inwards. It is my belief that they will attempt to use its cluttered orbital debris as a means of cover.
As I'm going through the translation, I find that the Zentradi, the alien race, have referred to Saturn as being the fifth planet, and I kind of stopped and was like, well, wait a minute, it's the sixth planet. This doesn't make any sense. So I, kept watching, and sure enough, in the next scene, they showed a view screen of the Zentradi, viewing our solar system, and it showed Saturn, where it begins in the correct position. So I was like, okay, just kind of chalked it up to error, corrected the error, wrote a note, and then moved on, and then came around to episode 7, and in the original script, it had written Mars as being the fourth planet, and that was scratched out and handwritten in 7th. And so we had the second instance of there being a discrepancy, but now it became clear that this was, it wasn't a discrepancy of oversight. Someone had clearly wanted this to be the Zentradi counting system. It didn't make any sense because even if you count from the sun going outward or from Pluto inward, the numbers didn't match up. But when we have Mars, then we have Saturn. I kind of looked at those, and then it all made perfect sense. The Zentradi have knowledge of a 10th planet and are counting backward from that, including that 10th planet. And when you think about it that way, then suddenly Saturn is the 5th planet, Mars is the 7th. But the thing of it is, it's never addressed in the actual show. They just sort of include it, I guess, as an in-joke to anyone in the know. Talking this over with Matt Greenfield, the producer for the show, he decided that to be on the safe side, it would be better to render this as orbital body rather than planet. So my final translation for episode 6 was that it was the 5th orbital body counting outward. I was pulling out my hair over that one and sort of storming around the office. It doesn't make any sense! And one of my fellow translators said, "Does it have to be a 10th planet?" And I was like, that's it. There is a 10th planet, and they're counting backward from it. As part of Robotech, Macross was really what sort of caught my interest in Japanese animation and what I think provided at least some of the initial impetus for me to start learning Japanese in university. So I mean, it really holds a very special place, for me in my heart, and I think in the hearts of a lot of other people who are in my same age bracket. So one of the reasons I really wanted to do this for myself was for that sort of sentimental value and for the importance it holds for me. So one of the things I set out to do was to make this to help make this a definitive edition of Macross, and part of that on my end entails just doing the best possible, most accurate translation possible. 黒の空を貫いて地球を撃った雷は我ら幼い人類に目覚めてくれと放たれたマクロスマクロス惜しくたった若者は愛する人をかばいつつ旅立つ日々を戦い開く Will love me tomorrow 闇を切り裂き飛びゆく先は遠く輝く青い星宇宙の子らを引き連れて星の彼方の闇の中万古に続く戦いを目指して飛んだ定めの矢マクロスマクロス淡い日差しと灯り歌赤子の眠り母の胸愛する日々を戦い守る Will you love me tomorrow 闇を切り裂き伸びゆく光輝き満ちる日はいつか
When you were recording Macross at the beginning, what were your expectations?
I had no expectation whatsoever, no pressure, anything. I was just there in the studio to do my job. I was a college student, just for fun, like a after-school activity or something.
When did you kind of understand that it was a lot more than just that?
I started to see my pictures in the magazines, and there is an event called Anime Grand Prix in Japan, and actually that was the first time I sang in front of just a bunch of people. It was at the Nihon Budokan. It's like 30,000 people, or maybe that's too big. At least 10,000 people. And when I performed, they were like really like, Mari or Mime, or really loud. Then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm doing something that's huge. I didn't realize.
And your first album as a singer-songwriter came out not long afterward. What was that time like for you?
Very, very happy time. Couldn't believe my luck. And of course, I gave my effort, but the luck came with it. So I was telling my friends that I have no regret even if I die tomorrow. I did everything I wanted. That was a great time.
This is a broad question, but how did playing Minmay affect your life and your career?
I think plus minus both I experienced because I had such a big exposure because of Macross when I first started. I think many people knew my name when I released my first album, so that was good. But after like 5 years or 6 years after I debuted, people still wanted to talk about Macross when I was promoting my new albums, you know? So that was like a little bit like, do I have to talk about Macross again? It's like, it was a long time ago, guys. So somehow, because of Macross, some people didn't take me serious as a songwriter, singer-songwriter. But I was like, since I was a really, really child, I was writing songs and singing, playing piano. So I was a musician first, and then Macross happened to be there. I'm sure it's fate. I don't deny that. So, but I didn't understand why I had to go through all those struggles and pain. And I think that was one reason that I kind of wanted to get out of Japan and wanted to start as a musician from scratch. I didn't know, of course, how big challenge was gonna be, but so Macross effect was huge. But now when I think about, because I'm a little bit wiser, everything happens for a reason, and I really believe that. So somehow I had to go through that. And I was meant to play Minmay, and I was meant to sing that Do You Remember Love, the movie theme song. It's still popular, very popular in Japan, and I'm sure people all over the world still enjoy that song. And I didn't write that song, you know. Maybe people don't know, and maybe I shouldn't have said but I had some little bit negative feeling about that too. I didn't write this. You know, the second song, Angel Paint, I wrote it. So I was like, I wrote this, but I didn't write that because I was so young. I didn't, you know, I kind of didn't enjoy that, the fact that I didn't write that song. But when I sing that song, more than ever, I have a connection to the song. So I really feel like that song was there for me to sing. And it's so ironic that the end of the movie, that Do You Remember Love movie, I don't remember the exact dialogues, but what is this? Like, if people find little piece of lyrics of Do You Remember Love, and then I sing that, and that's gonna stop the whole space war. And sorry what I'm talking about, I forgot. But it's like that. It seemed like at that time like little ballad, but I think it affected so many people's lives in all over the world. So I am Minmay, and I was Minmay, and I really needed to sing that song. And still, people feel kind of some kind of like ease listening to that song. So it was my destiny to sing that. And now I'm returning to Macros and doing this new gig. Somehow my life kind of started from here and kind of went and made a circle like this. And I've been living in LA for like about 15 years, more than 15 years. And of course it was not, sometimes it wasn't easy, you know, a lot of struggles and little pains. But now, because if I wasn't living in America, maybe this gig didn't come to me, and maybe I'm not speaking English like this now. So I feel blessed that maybe, sorry, I'm talking about God, but maybe God had that plan that maybe you're gonna return to this. So now Macros is not in the past, it's something that's current. So I don't feel any weird feeling towards Macros talking about it.
Being a singer-songwriter and the actress who played Minmay hasn't always been easy, but you've really come to peace with it recently. Tell us about that.
It happened only like 2 or 3 months ago. The process was kind of, I think the process happened slowly, little by little, but when I attended this, some kind of a small, it was not a convention, but Macros fans, some meeting thing, I was invited, and I agreed to be there. And I was talking about Macros, honestly, what happened, and they were giving me questions, and I thought I did fine. But after that, I got some kind of negative reactions. I went to see some BBS, and people were not pleased about my answers. Then I felt kind of scared. Oh my gosh, I can't say anything right about Macros or animation. If I open my mouth, I offend people. So I had to decide, maybe this is it. I'm not gonna talk about Macros. I'm not gonna talk about animation, maybe. This is it, because it seems like we have no connection, me and animation world. I don't know what to do. And I'm a very sensitive person, so I take things personally too, really hard. So then something happened, like, why don't you, it was almost like I heard a voice that, why don't you watch the whole Macros series from the first episode to the end? So a long time ago, like more than 10 years ago, my friend copied each episode onto the VHS tapes. So I took out those tapes from the closet and I started to watch each episode. And I saw the whole thing like in 3-4 days, actually. I was like, so, when I focus so good. And then when I finished watching, I felt, wow. It didn't seem old at all. It didn't age, the series. And I didn't know anything about acting, but I gave everything I had, and it was really refreshing to see me playing Minmay. And the stories were very interesting, the love triangle and the space war. And maybe when I was playing Minmay, I wasn't following the stories that closely, and I was busy doing all kinds of stuff. So I had a brand new appreciation for Macros, the whole Macros. Then I felt like this hard, what do you call it, like a little hard thing in my heart melted, like almost like flushing into the toilet. And then, Macross was fun. And after, like a week after, your company contacted me if I wanna play Minmay again. Interesting.
There's a scene actually in episode 8, I think it is, and the setup behind that is that Hikaru has these two new people under his wing. He has Max, of course, and Kakizaki, and he keeps telling them he's going to take them out to some really nice place. And so they're out there walking around, the town, and all of a sudden Kakizaki is like, whoa, like a kid in a candy store, and he runs down this little alleyway. And he's like, oh, is this the place you wanted to take us to? All right. And, I'm not really sure how well that carries over, but actually what he's looking at is a little alleyway it's basically the Macross's red light district, and there in the foreground you have like the Black Cat Club, and it looks kind of upscale, so it's probably what you'd call a hostess bar or a snack. But then right next door to that you have this very pink, sort of garish looking place, and then further on down the alleyway you have these girls standing outside their respective stores. So yeah, what they're definitely looking at is the red light district, and of course pink being representative of the sex for pay, or at least very risque industry in Japan. I thought it was kind of amusing actually that you have the entire population of South Otaria Island, and they've been teleported out into deep space, and things are crumbling around them, and they're rescued and pulled on board, and they rebuild their city on board the ship, but by God, they also have to rebuild their red light district. So I thought that was kind of amusing. The raised pinky gesture, oh man, that kind of took me back seeing that one. I mean, the raised pinky gesture is traditionally accompanied by the word kore, which means this. You're like, so she's your this. And that's a kind of a slang term to mean your girlfriend. And I guess the flip side, the counterpart to that is you're this, which is your boyfriend. But I mean, at least in my own experience, I never really saw them that much in real life. So it was kind of like, oh man, he pulled out the pinky gesture. And actually, speaking of that and sort of the nostalgia value for a lot of this show, I mean, it was kind of funny. In that episode, around episodes 8 to 9, we see a bunch of different interesting things go on in terms of just the slang that gets thrown around in the show. I mean, we're looking at a show that's like 20 or so years old, and so you have this slang,
Minmay-chanってわりかしいプロポーションしてるの知ってたか?トランジスタグラマーってやつだよ.
When Max is referring to Minmay, he calls her this sort of what they call waseego, which is basically made in Japan English. He calls her a transistor glamour.
トランジスタグラマー.
I'm like, transistor glamour? Heck is that? And, did some research, and sure enough, Anime Go's original translation had it right on the ball. It's like a small, compact body, but with all just the right features. And then another one, you had Kakizaki. He referred to Minmay as Shan. And I'm like, Shan? What the heck is Shan? So again, did some more research, found out it comes from German, Schön, and it means basically an attractive young girl. Languages move on, and I guess Japanese is no exception.
それより敵の位置の表示ぐらい送ってくれても?
それが軍用装備がうまくそちらに.
あれ?
I think it's in episode 9, you have Hikaru, and he goes out in the Armored Valkyrie because they've picked up this incoming signal from the 3 Zentradi. And so he doesn't want to miss out, of course, on Minmay's big, Miss Macross pageant. So he dials in to the transmission, and just for a second we catch a little bit of what counts for a commercial. You just catch the very tail end of it, but it's talking about a store called Zenepuro in the 3rd Ward. And I didn't see how the finished subtitles were in the original version, but in the translation that I saw, it had a slight misspelling of Zeneburo. And when I heard that, I was like, it's Zenepuro. And Zene is short for Zenedar, or general, and Pro for products, general products. And that actually, the name itself is taken from the Ringworld series written by Larry Niven. And that name was then in turn used to refer to a small store that was set up by 2 gentlemen, Takeda and Okada, And those two would coincidentally later go on to found, among other people, Studio Gainax. So it was very much a sort of in-joke to those in the know. It's like, hey, if you're a sci-fi fan, especially sort of an underground one, and you'll know the store I'm talking about. It's General Products in the Third Ward, and so I thought that was kind of neat.
When I was born, I think there was already a piano in the house.
Your voice is sounding right. I feel a distance.
My parents are both dentists, but they're both music lovers. So they were always playing music in the house. I was already into like harmonies and melodies. So I'm sure that was a huge effect on my life. And I started to play piano when I was 3 or 4.
I can find a peace in my mind.
And my favorite songs were, we used to call it group sound. For you guys, it's the band. They were called the Tigers. It's like a sports team, but they had many, many hit songs, and I was like in love with the singer.
Yes, I love you. Don't ever let me go. Yes, I love you. If you really wanna know, more than anything, more than anything.
I had a piano teacher when I was, I think, 4. I was kind of a unusual or special child in school. Like you, I'm sure you had a girl in the classroom who can play piano and had a long hair. You know, I was one of those. I always thought I had to do music. Like there was some information in my brain or heart that I was going to be a musician. In school, if there are 2 choices that I can join the basketball club or a music club, like some band, I always had to take the music. I felt like that was the thing I had to follow. I started to write my own songs when I was a 5th grader. It was all about like everyday things, like I'm so glad the test is over, or my dog is barking, like that. But I was inspired by other singer-songwriters who were famous at that time. I was almost like wanted to be like them, so I was playing piano and singing and wrote some songs and lyrics. I was always studying the classical piano, but always writing songs as a hobby. When I saw some other singer-songwriters were doing the style, playing piano and singing and writing, it just felt like I could do it easily or something. I can do it. So I just started. I started to write songs and started to record to the cassette tape recorder and doing some concerts for my families in the house. Also, I was a piano player for a lot of school events at school. So I had kind of many chances that I could perform in front of people. When I graduated music high school, I was gonna go to Kunitachi Music College. Then I was gonna be a pianist. I know it's hard to be a classical pianist, but my teachers thought I could. They felt like I was chosen to be that. But I was so afraid to lose my hobby, the writing songs and singing, and because that was the fun part. Practicing piano was like the hard, like like oh, I don't want to practice today, but I can write songs. So I was talking to my teacher that is it okay for me to continue, because I was gonna go to different country to study seriously my piano. So. And then the teacher asked me to sing in front of her, and I did that. And she thought I was expressing my feelings more freely than when I was playing piano. My own music was freer than classical music. So then I decided, okay, I'm gonna go to my own college in Japan, and at the same time, I'm gonna shop for a record deal. So I made a few demo tapes, only few, like 4 or 5 cassette tapes. And I sent to the places like, when you open the magazines, you see we want a keyboard player, or, we are looking for a singer-songwriter. Like that, I sent 4 or 5 tapes. And then suddenly, one guy maybe heard my tape and didn't like it, and he passed to somebody else, and it ended up at the JVC Victor Japan. It's just kind of amazing story. And then I got signed when I was 18. My parents saved some money for a kimono. Japanese girls always wear kimono when they become 20, and there's a huge kind of a celebration ceremony. I gave up on that, and I bought a synthesizer instead of a kimono. And I used that and used my piano and made the demo. Yeah, it happened like in 2 or 3 months maybe. When I first went to see my director at the record company, he was giving me like his impression about my music. I liked it. Somebody didn't like it, but I liked it. What do you think? Do you wanna do this? And at the same time, a different division of JVC Victor was looking for somebody who could play minmay. And of course, the record company was a part of the group because they were gonna release the soundtrack. So of course, the production, Tatsunoko Production, and other production companies who were involved in the project, they were all looking for and auditioning for the minmay part. A guy from the animation division came to me and asked, what do you think? Are you interested in it? Tomorrow is gonna be the last audition. Do you wanna try that? And of course, I had no idea what Macross was or minmay was and how popular it was going to be. I just liked challenges. Like, I always liked it. So I said, yeah, why not? I'm gonna go for it. We already had a plan that we were going to record my first album, but the Macross came first. My record company asked me, who do you want to work with? So I said, I want to work with Ryuichi Sakamoto, who was at the time very, very popular figure because of the YMO, Yellow Magic Orchestra, that one of the very first techno bands. And also he was in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence as an actor, and also he wrote the theme song. It was the beginning of his great time of his career too. Of course, I didn't know if he was gonna say yes, but my staff sent a demo tape to his production company. And he said, I wanna meet Mari. So we went to see him at his office. And he said, yeah, I'm gonna do it. It was kind of casual. I think that I was pretty calm about it, actually. Like, I was like, it's not like, hey, don't take me so lightly, or I wasn't throwing attitudes or anything, but I was like really solid that no one can make fun of me, kind of vibe. So I almost said something something back to him when he commented about music. I think, I don't think so, or something. I wasn't afraid of anything. I kind of freaked out more when Ryuichi came to the studio and rehearsed with me. He watched me play this song called Lovesick from my first album called Rose. I was pretty nervous, so I was kind of rushing. You know, when you're young, you rush. Like yesterday, I was watching the figure skate. Yep, and then young skaters were kind of rushing to the music. Anyway, I was rushing, and he was like, he had a pencil, and he was like timing me with like hitting the piano. And that kind of made me nervous. He was like, don't rush. You're a good piano player, but don't rush. And actually, that was a good lesson. And I don't rush now. I think I consider myself as one of the musicians who don't rush. I can groove and stay into the groove. So that was the first lesson for me from Ryuichi, that, hey, get into the groove and stay in there. He hired all those really top Japanese studio musicians at that time. We recorded it together, the whole album. And Ryuichi was, he just got the synthesizer named DX7, and it was like a brand new toy for him. So he was having so much fun using that, and because I was, so young and I didn't, have any fear. It was an instant hit, already top 10 hit, and I had on the debut day, I had a half promotional, half a fun appreciation event at this beautiful building owned by a designer, Hanae Mori. She's a designer, and she has a building in Harajuku, and I did the party, live concert, and the party later. And then I felt like, wow, maybe they are taking me really serious. They wanted me to be a big star. And I felt really good, But I didn't know any struggle before. So at that time, I didn't know that I was going to, feel the struggle later. Usually people struggle at the beginning, right? To get a deal or to make the venue packed. But I didn't have any problem doing that from the beginning. So the challenge came later. I already had a radio show before even my album came out. And after that, I had 2-3 radio shows in a week. We had this a huge trend that college girls were so popular in Japan, and a lot of talents were college students, and I was one of those. So Miss DJ Request Parade was they had every day different college students, but they were also talents. And it was live, so thrilling. Sometimes I had a partner with me who was a music critic. So we talked about, because I was of course a musician, but huge music fan. So we talked about music and played my favorite songs. And I was so into Tears for Fears at that time. So the record company loved me, their record company. They gave me all kinds of... I also wrote a liner note for Tears for Fears for their 12-inch record. I'm so excited now. And they came to my other radio show as a guest too. So I met many people, Tears for Fears, Howard Jones, all those British people from the 80s. It was fun. I received 3,000, 4,000 letters every week at that time. So the radio thing was a huge thing. And also I had concert tour, but it was not like 200 cities. It was more like 30 cities in maybe 2 months. Pretty busy. The first album came on September 21st in '83. I had to release the next one in 6 months. And of course, if you count the recording time, I had to write songs quickly. I had a lot of pressure because I had already a hit album and everybody was expecting for me to have another hit album and didn't have much time. And I was also a college student, so that was hard. Even when you're in a good position or when you are having the truth is good time, you sometimes feel like you're not doing great, right? Do you understand what I mean? So when I finished my fourth album, actually I recorded my fourth album in London. That was fun. I think things were kind of changing, like I could not just make a demo with just me and piano anymore. My record company staff, they were kind of giving me pressure. No one makes your song demo with just piano anymore. Everybody has like 4 tracks or 8 tracks, and they were giving me pressure like, you're so old-fashioned or something, and I didn't like it. So I tried my best to please them. And when I think about it, I could just be me. I could just be proud of myself, the way I was, but I cared about what people thought much more than now. So I tried to adjust, but then my record company started to, I don't know if everybody was thinking that way, but a part of them started to tell me that maybe you should start singing other people's songs, less writing. And then I thought, danger. I quit my management company and I quit the record company at the same time. It was so kind of a little bit crazy. And I made my own production company and shopped for a record deal again. I moved to Los Angeles in 1989. I made my 6th album in Los Angeles. It's called Miss Lemon. And I met this musician and I kind of ended up falling in love. I decided to move here. And I had an ambition. I was in love, but I also had an ambition to break through the US music scene because I was kind of still naive and young, and I thought it was kind of easy. It could come because until then everything kind of came, my dream came true kind of easily. I worked hard, but it came to me, so I had no doubt I could do it. Brave. When the Warner Music Japan, when they dropped me in 1999, that was a shocker. And I knew it was gonna come because they were always kind of threatening me. Because you are in Los Angeles, we can't promote your record as much as we want, and you can't just jump into the train and come to the radio station or anything. So we have our promotion is limited. So someday, maybe we have to kick you out. It was right after I moved here, they were like telling me that. So I thought I was ready, but actually I received a phone call on the Thanksgiving Day that we are done with you. So that was a shocker. Right after they dropped me, I was still like, it doesn't hurt me. I'm gonna release my album independently, and I did. In the same year, I released my first independent English album. I was worried when I, started to record like a little bit lower budget stuff, that maybe it's gonna sound like a demo tape, but that's not happening. Performing is fun, but also can be a scary thing because it depends how you feel that day. Sometimes you don't feel great, sometimes you feel great, and sometimes your vocal cord is in a good condition but not. So when I think I can say this about everything, but when you're young, you don't have fear, you just have fun doing things. But once you kind of learn like how to feel fear about something, you get kind of small and okay. So then after that, again, you have to learn how to break through that fear and that thing that I wanna hide kind of thing. So I've always liked to perform. I always loved performing. I think that when I perform, more like stuff coming up from my heart. So a lot of people say that I like your live concert more than your record. And that's a good compliment. And that's why when I'm in Los Angeles, I try to keep performing because if you don't perform for a long time, like if you don't perform like 6 months, then if I suddenly perform at the 7th month, then you get really nervous. When I was in Japan and my popularity was at the peak, maybe I'm gonna have another peak, so. But I had more people, more audience, 3,000, 4,000. Now it's a little bit smaller, but more intimate. And they absolutely love me. There's no one who's there to tease me or anything. They just couldn't wait to see me again. So I appreciate it. I appreciate that every time they come back, and it's like we are sharing our lives together or something. We grew up together, we struggled together, and one thing though, I wanna my guy fans to get married and have wives and have children. So my audience becomes 3 times more people. I say that to them, but they go, oh, but I don't write songs from me. Recently, it's a little bit slow, I have to admit, but it's not like I don't want to wait, but usually it happens. I hear something. The melody and lyric came to me at the same time, even a part of a song. And then so I can create a song based on that, from it. So I usually don't force myself to write. I can write. If somebody says, please write something in 5 minutes, I can write. But to me, that's not real. I almost feel like I'm a messenger, and maybe there are some message out there up high, and I'm almost like a medium or something that maybe they are ready to send those messages to me, then I catch it. That's how I feel. So I feel that I'm talented, a talented musician, but I'm a tool of God or the universe or something. That's how I feel. So I try not to like brag about it. I'm so musically talented. I have to try, because you can't be lazy if you want to succeed in anything. But when you're trying your best, the opportunity comes, I think. Now I'm focusing on this Macross gig, and each episode I want to get better and better. Of course, I'm trying my best, the bestest. Then I want to focus on my album while I'm auditioning for a few parts here and there. But I want to make an album because my latest album was released in 2004. It's been a while, so I have already songs. So I just have to focus and start making productions. I write songs for myself to make me feel better, but it works for others too, because we can relate to each other. We all have pain in our hearts, and because I've lived my life long enough, I have so much experience in my life now. So I think that my words reach to people's heart deeper than when I was 19 or 20, my voice changed and maybe songs are not the same. But I hope that it has more depth now. Actually, a few years ago, JVC Victor Entertainment Japan released an album called Mari Iijima Sings Rin Min-mei, and I produced it. And I rearranged a few songs from the TV series, and I wrote a new song called Why, and I wrote a melody, and Min-mei wrote lyrics. It was me, but I wrote it as Min-mei's point of view. So the song is about why did you choose her instead of me? Her is Misa. My latest album is called Wonderful People. It's not just like a boy and girl love songs, more global, big love, and especially like the title song Wonderful People. It's about more about life, that like when you grow up, when you're a child, you get influenced by people around you, like adults, your parents, your teachers, and they tell you like, you're not good enough. Why didn't you score 100 instead of 95? And when we are born, I think, we are all like really pure light, perfect. Maybe if we had like our previous lives, maybe we had something in our heart's tape recorder, maybe some memories, but we are all shiny light. But because of those like influence, we start losing our confidence, and maybe I'm not good enough, and then we become weird, like a little bit, like start crying. So the Wonderful People is that my message is that we are still perfect as we are, and I know we have maybe colors. We are not like crystal clear ball now, but we have some colors, but we are still perfect. So let's take care of ourselves first. And if you had a little pain when you heard that when you were a kid, just close your eyes. I'm like a guru now. Close your eyes and you kind of pat your little you in your heart. And if you do that like 30 minutes every day, you become stronger. Like, you went through so much, but you're still okay. And I went through all that. Like a few years ago, I had a horrible broken heart experience. That kind of changed my life. So I almost appreciate the person who broke my heart. But I found out so many things about me and life. So the message is that just if someone tells you something nice, take it in and believe it, because you're great, you're perfect. We're perfect. We are perfect.
In Macross, I play the role of Hikaru Ichijo.
I played Roy Fokker. I know there's a joke there, just let it go.
I play Commander Bruno J. Global.
Roy is the senpai to the hero.
To get the chance to play Hikaru has been a real pleasure.
The first thing I saw was the wavy blonde hair.
He wears a big white hat, like a white sailor's cap, and a big blue jacket.
I want to put that on.
Unorthodox, a little kooky.
He's a lot of fun. He's
fighter pilot.
He's a bit bratty.
He's part Italian.
No.
He's Italian, actually.
He's from Dallas.
He's a bit
of a bumbling character.
Immature.
Probably a football player.
Unorthodox, a little kooky.
But he's got a great attitude.
And he likes to drink his beer.
Which makes him a lot of fun to play.
At first, I didn't want to do it.
I'm not sure how I got this role.
Certain amounts of money I need to drive from Austin to Houston.
It's such an enormous privilege to be a part of something that has had such a huge impact.
And this wasn't it.
Been working with Matt Greenfield and ADV.
And he said, I'll make it worth your while if you'll just come and do this bit part.
When I found out that ADV was doing it and got the opportunity to be cast as Hikaru, I was really excited.
So then I came down and he goes, okay, now here's the real reason why I wanted to bring you down.
And the neatest thing was,
one day walked to work and
there's this show and I was like,
somebody was talking about Macross, and
the funny thing about this,
Matt turned around and said, and you're global.
A year earlier,
20 years ago,
what's a global?
Living in Houston,
I had met,
just got out of high school,
this really sweet girl,
working just a regular schmuck job.
I met her at Anime Weekend Atlanta.
On Channel 39.
I didn't know anything about what she did.
There was the show came on called Robotech, and I'm not an anime fan, but
she and I really hit it off because we were both musicians and singers and had a great weekend.
I saw this cartoon and I thought, this is really cool.
I find out a year later,
the story's really good.
ADV is not only doing Macross,
and the thing that I thought of was, boy, I would love to play one of these characters.
But they are hiring the girl who played Minmay in the original series 20 years ago.
I wasn't even thinking about being a voice actor then.
And then I find out the kicker.
20 years later,
it's Mariajima.
I was like,
I was so excited.
20 years later, I get to be Roy Fokker.
I knew her already, and I had no idea.
This is awesome.
I knew nothing about Macross.
I knew that Robotech was huge.
Being someone who liked the show when I was younger.
Certainly that Macross was part of that series.
I was on the wrong side of the curve for the Robotechs.
The original Robotech actually took 3 series and melded them together.
I knew about it, but I wasn't really into it. I didn't, I was...
Rewrote the stories and made it one big story arc, and that's why they changed some of the names. Rick Hunter.
I'm sort of an anomaly, I guess.
There are a lot of fans that really wanted the original story. An American English version of the original Macross.
Or an enigma, whatever the word is. I'd watch Johnny Quest over and over and over, and I never got into new shows.
It's a huge honor. It's a huge privilege.
It's almost like going back and being able to redo an old classic, a film classic.
It's really cool to be able to see if we can, with the limitations of the animation and the music and stuff, how we can come back and still make it something viable and interesting to watch.
Unfortunately, I can't give you fortunately, I can't give you some long-winded answer about it.
What I find most enjoyable about the work that I do are the fans.
The chicks. That's my favorite thing,
The most important thing to me is preserving the character.
Actually, it really is the most rewarding thing, because if I would have never gotten into voice acting, I would have never met my wife.
Did he marry her?
I was doing children's theater at the time. She had just done some roles, and I thought it looked pretty cool, and she said, well, if you think you can do it.
After I did my first job, I went, wait a minute, I went to work in jeans and a t-shirt. I didn't have to shave.
10 years later, I've still been doing it all the time, thinking that, this will be my last role. And Matt seemed to see something that he liked, so.
My 2 passions merged, acting and voice work.
When I go to conventions or I get emails from fans, to me, that's my favorite part.
It's weird, because a lot of people, it must be the money. No, it's definitely not the money.
I made how much? Wow, I kind of like this.
It's the ability of walking into a booth and having fun with the character.
One thing that I just pray never happens is that, Hikaru in episode 13 doesn't sound anything like Hikaru in episodes 1 and 2.
When you're in the studio and you do a line, you deliver it.
People actually were watching what I did and liked what I did.
They loved this show, or they loved this character.
People go, wow, how do you do that? I go, well, I just do. It's my job.
It really is a charge to know that people like what you do.
They really enjoyed what you did here, or they were really moved by what happened here.
Recognition from your peers, affirmation from your people that you work with in this business that recognize you as doing something really well I think that's the greatest reward you could ever ask for.
It seems like the fans know a whole lot about the process by now.
There's, I believe, a misconception with voice acting.
A lot of fans still don't really understand that we record alone.
You're in a booth, there's a microphone.
There are no other characters in the booth.
You know, I go to the conventions and the people pretty much know what's going on.
It's not just walking in the booth and opening your mouth and letting whatever spew forth.
You know, the Japanese do it very differently. They record together as a group, almost like, imagine like a Reader's Theater, where they would stand in a line and somebody steps up and says their line, and then they step back and somebody steps up and says their line, and they record as an ensemble.
Any really talented actor, when you watch them in the booth, they're not sitting there like this doing their lines. They're animated. They're acting it out, you know, and it's, you have to be careful not to hit the microphone and stuff like that. But they're physicalizing their character, which totally brings it to life on screen, which is so important. And that's why it's exhausting, and you can't sit in a session for 4 hours at a time and do this.
We can't do that.
Because they wear themselves out.
The attention to matching the mouth flaps and the attention to the detail of the reads, it would be impractical to try to record several people at once.
You don't want this to sound like you're just reading words off the script.
There's a little bit of a trickiness to that a lot of fans don't really know.
Because much like the camera can detect if you're faking it, the microphone will pick it up as well.
So when you hear an emotional, heart-wrenching scene between characters and it really sounds like they're talking to each other, that's completely the magic of the process.
I think the most important thing about voice acting is about any acting is that it has to sound like it's coming from here.
Because they're not together. They're not in the same room. And many times, they can't even hear each other. Whoever records first doesn't have anybody to play off of.
That's sometimes a very hard bridge for actors to cross.
So that sense of dialogue needs to be created, completely created.
Once you can get across that bridge and make that leap, it's like, you know, the heavens opened up. You're like, oh, I see how this is done. Because it really is. It makes the difference between a great performance, which is believable, and a performance that is not believable, that just sits there.
I think they'd probably be surprised at how hard it would be to make a solid career out of it.
You know, there's so much luck involved and so much timing.
How much hustling you have to do.
As much as I'd like to believe how wonderful I am, there are plenty of other actors out there who are just as good, probably a lot better than I am.
If you wanted to not only be successful, but make enough money to actually really make money.
When I'm not directing or acting,
I do a lot of other things professionally besides voice acting.
Yard work.
I'm a professional music composer and producer.
I'm sitting around wishing I were.
Well, I've been doing a lot of stuff lately.
I do a lot of shooting and editing. I have a production company of my own.
I like to eat.
My degree is actually in film.
I like to eat a lot.
Yard work.
It's a very simple life I lead.
And I also do a lot of graphic design work.
No.
I'd like to say I like to exercise, but that's pretty self-evident I don't.
I also am very active at my church.
I love going to shows and seeing a good band that I've never seen before.
I play guitar and
play the piano and sing and lead the band.
I'm becoming really addicted to Guitar Hero for the PlayStation 2.
I'm married. I have 2 children, with 1 on the way.
And that's a very, very big part, a very important part of my life.
I'm a musician myself, so when I have a chance to play, I like doing that.
I love music. I don't think I could ever just say, okay, I'm just going to be a voice actor.
This is a very crazy business.
My full-time job is doing IT work.
It's all about working when you can because you don't know when you're going to work again.
Fixing computers, that kind of thing.
I could never do that to music or video or film or graphic design.
It's a great job to have when your secondary career is voice acting.
There's a lot of tough decisions sometimes to make.
Because I got the steady money and then I could do the other stuff, and I'm not so much at the whim of the director.
I wouldn't just want to be a music composer, producer, or a singer. I love voice acting. I love acting. I love video.
Try to just juggle that lifestyle.
I try my best to juggle all of them and kind of keep all the balls in the air at the same time.
My goal is to get everything, have a restaurant one day where everything comes on a stick.
I'm really happy doing what I'm doing.
I'm really grateful to be able to get the chance to do all of them. And I don't think I could ever give any one of them up, but I love them all.
I just want to just continue enjoying my life and not being stressed out and worrying about if this person likes me or this other one. I just enjoy my life. And if the good role comes up, take it and do my best. Just every time, I just try to do the best job that I can. And just be in the role instead of going, well, what is this going to do for my career? I think that's more important.
I play Claudia.
I play Misa Hayase.
Claudia drives the boat.
Excellent woman of power.
Oh, and she's a little sassy.
She's very into her work.
Because in the Japanese, the same voice actress does Claudia and the narrator. I do both.
She really cares about her friends, and she really cares about her coworkers, and she really cares about somebody else. What I knew about Macross was basically that it was one of the original shows that Robotech was based off of.
I had never heard of it.
I remember watching Robotech, and I actually had a Lisa Hayes doll.
So I looked it up on the internet and discovered that I had been living under a rock, apparently, because it was everywhere.
I didn't remember a lot of it because, you know, being that young and trying to remember, do I remember seeing this on television? No, not really. So for me, it was coming into almost a brand new show.
And it's huge. Very, very huge. You know, I've done a lot of work for Matt Greenfield over the years, and anybody who knows what I've done over the past 8 or 9 years knows that fighter pilot's kind of my thing. So Matt didn't audition me. He just said, come on and do this.
I was actually at a convention in Las Vegas, and I got a call from Paul, who does our scheduling, and he said, you know, I need you to come in as soon as you get back from Vegas. We came straight to ADV, and I was handed this piece of paper by Matt, and he's like, okay, well, you're gonna read this, and it's for Macross, and you're going to be this, you know, strong voice. And I was like, what am I doing? I have no idea. And he said, oh, you're playing Misa Hayase in Macross. And I was like, oh, great.
It is really cool. I mean, you definitely know when you're recording that you're doing something important.
And then he explained to me, okay, well, this is the show that Robotech came from, and I was like, oh, well, I'm very familiar with Robotech. And then when I put 2 and 2 together and realized that, oh, Misa's probably what made him think of me for Misa, we did a show a few years back called Razafon, and I played a character named Haruka Shito, and I can see a lot of equivalences in Haruka and Misa. There's this caring and tenderness towards a certain someone, but on the same side, this wall. This kind of exterior, this harsh exterior that they've built because they are women of power.
I was in a rock band for a lot of my college years and out of college, and I just kind of had a rock and roll feel to me, and I like barking orders. You know, that's where my strengths are, and that's where my voice is deeper, and I can get very loud and aggressive and powerful. It's the girly shows I'm not so good at.
I want her to have a pride about her, and so when I go into the booth, it's always standing up very straight and having this booming voice. However, when she's just being Misa and she's talking to Claudia or she's talking to Hikaru or whoever, it's kind of a more introverted stance. I kind of bring my shoulders in and kind of bring it all inward because she is kind of a shy little girl on the inside. There's little changes in the voice. You'll notice when she's barking orders, she's very serious and very harsh. But when she's just having a conversation with someone, she's a little more careful about the words she uses. She's a little more careful about not hurting anyone's feelings or making sure that she's saying things the way that they're meant to be said. For me, the first time was the hardest, the first couple of volumes, because all she did really was bark orders. It was just rah, 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 and fighting with Hikaru and all this. Once we got to the point where her wall started to come down and you saw the true Misa, For me, that's when I really, as an actor, started getting really excited and thinking, okay, well now I have to find this whole other aspect to this character. I'm hoping when people watch it, they don't, I don't want that to come across as, oh, well, that's where she changed her voice or whatever to make, you know, her seem more demure. But it's more of, I hope that when they see her, they see an entire person, a multifaceted person, and not just a character that barks orders or does this or does that. She's just such a multifaceted character.
The more challenging aspect isn't Claudia, it's the narration, because there's so much of it and it goes on for so long. I've found that it's easier to do if I haven't really read it very closely. If I'm just going with what I see immediately. And the very first narration we did, we kind of set a bar really high with a lot of energy and very much movie guy, you know, very much like action film narration. I've kind of had to keep it at that level. I remember the first time I recorded, I didn't know there was so much narration, and I really pushed on the first one, and Matt said, okay, now there's about 20 more. Just like that. What? I didn't pace myself quite well enough, but so the narration is the biggest challenge. It is kind of campy in a lot of respects, and the way to play camp is to play it completely seriously, and just completely serious. This is the most grave thing that's ever happened, and the more seriousness you put into it, the campier it sounds. So that's kind of how I've approached the narration.
When you stand up straight, you have a different type of voice than you would, you know, if you're kind of curled over and bent over. It kind of helps you feel what the character's feeling. For example, when I did Noir, you know, I played a character named Kiriko who was this quiet assassin, but she, you know, fought. She could kill anyone in a moment's notice. When I was doing Foley, because basically the sounds when she moves around or whatever, that's basically all she did. She didn't talk a whole lot. I found it much easier if I actually kind of ducked when she ducked, or, you know, kind of moved the way she moved, because it sounds more natural.
When I'm having a sword fight, I'm having a sword fight. You have to. It doesn't sound real unless you do.
If I just stand here and go, you know, it just kind of sounds kind of stupid. But if I'm actually moving as the character moves, it makes a huge difference.
If I'm being punched or kicked, or I'm swinging a sword or firing a gun, I do all the gestures. I do everything. Sometimes I have a pencil and I fight with that. Move around. If I have to run, I run.
I think that carries over with emotions. If you have a character that's very proud and you bring everything from your chest, it really makes a difference on the way the character sounds. Whereas if you have someone that's shy or introverted, they're a little more quiet. The good thing about Misa is I get to do both. She gets to be this, you know, loud and strong female, and then 5 seconds later, she's protecting her heart, and she's kind of introverted and quiet, and it does make a huge difference. And I think a lot of people would be surprised if they came in and watched, because you don't expect that. We move like crazy people, jumping up and down.
The trick is you can't move your head. It's a small booth, microphone here, very limited range. You've got a cone that you have to stay in, so you're doing all this stuff with your head still where it should be.
I've been doing this for 7 years now.
I'm ancient. I guess I'm considered one of the veterans because I've been doing it since 1998. Back when I first started, dubbing wasn't cool. In fact, we got a lot of hostility toward the dub tracks, and since then it's changed entirely. Now it's become a very accepted way to watch anime.
Jason Douglas, one of the other voice actors here, and I were friends. We'd been doing theater together forever, and he basically said, you know, you need to think about doing this. I was like, oh no, I've never done anything professional like that before. No, I can't do it.
I was in a theater group with Amanda Wynn and Brett Weaver, old names that anime fans will know, and they were working at ADV. So I said, well, I'm a working actor and I need to have work and they pay, so I'm going to see if I can get an audition.
And it just so happened they were having open auditions that weekend. And I went, and it just kind of happened.
I sent in my voice tape and heard nothing at all. About 6 months later, I sent another one. Nothing. So about 3 months later, I sent in another one. And then waited and waited and waited. And I guess about a month later, Matt Greenfield called me and said he'd found my first voice tape in a filing cabinet that he was cleaning out. And he listened to it, and there was a song on the back of it. And he was gearing up to do Bubblegum Crisis. And the song was a rock and roll song, and the character that I ultimately auditioned for in Bubblegum is in a rock band.
You know, I didn't expect to do it, I just kind of fell into it, but now this is what I do. This is my job, and this is my career, and I absolutely adore it. I love it.
You know what's most rewarding about being a voiceover actor? There are days when you just don't feel like looking that good. And when you're an actor on camera, you can't have those days. And being a voiceover artist, I can work regularly and not have to look good.
For me, probably the most rewarding part is being able to take a character that, yes, someone else has already done, but at the same time, being able to put your spin on things. It's kind of like a puzzle. It's saying, okay, well, I don't want to stray too far from what the Japanese have done, but at the same time, I have to make this character my own person. What's rewarding is at the end of the day, when it's all over, when you get to the end of the series or the end of the episode or whatnot, and you feel that character, you can kind of sense the emotions and the feelings of that character. That's kind of when I know that, okay, I've done my job. I've done what I needed to do, and especially at the end of the show when you have to let that character go. And it hurts. It's actually kind of painful. It's like giving away a little part of yourself. You know, to me, as it may sound sad, but that's the rewarding part. It's like, you know, I actually put so much of myself into it that at the end of the day, it was painful to let it go.
My number one goal when I go into a recording session is to have fun. Actually, it is. I've been doing this a very, very long time, and I've done over 100 shows. And if you're having fun, if you're really getting into the artistic side of the work, it sounds so much better.
How the show was never dubbed, you know, I know there was Robotech, but how this show, Macross, on its own was never dubbed, I don't see how that was possible. And then to be taken as part of this new cast, working with Mari, who I have utmost respect for as a seiyuu, as an actress, as a singer. It's just beyond your wildest dreams.
I had actually met Mari before, and we became friends. So when I didn't even know she was coming in to do Macross, and I came into the lobby and saw her there, and she's like, "Oh, Christine!"
It's kind of like, you know, seeing a rock band and being a fan of the rock band, and then one day you're in the rock band, and it's kind of bizarre. Anime has become this huge thing, both in Japan and here in the States. And to go back to what made it what it is today, the one show that kind of helped create the anime that we know and love today, to be a part of that is just, it's beyond my wildest dreams. It's awesome.
It was just so different from everything else that we had watched before.
They had problems, there were conflicts, they loved each other, they died, which certainly you never saw in American cartoons at that time. The main characters just didn't die.
I would rush home every day to watch it. I mean, if I had to do detention, I would say, you know, I will make it up to you. I'll come in on the weekends.
It had this magic to it. The characters were so fascinating, the storyline that was being told. I mean, essentially, it's a love story.
It was the show, I think, where everyone realized this is not regular animation. There's something unique going on here.
The animation style was very different than anything else that was on television. I think that was the first thing that really kind of struck me about it.
It's still phenomenal.
This is actually the very first Japanese tape I ever got. It's not actually a professional copy. This is the Japanese copy, and the stickers came in, I believe, Anime Out magazine. So I just stuck them on there so I'd identify it. But that's actually the first 2 episodes of Macross. This is the very first raw Japanese tape I ever got. Macross resonates throughout. From that point on, the first Laserdisc I ever bought from Japan was the Macross Motion Picture, and I have large quantities of Macross merchandise.
I had a friend call me up one day and tell me to turn on the TV, that he was watching this cartoon on there, science fiction story, and they just had this big spaceship come down and they did this hyperspace jump, but they were too close and they ended up taking part of an island with them to Pluto and all. And I just thought it really sounded kind of silly, actually. But I turned it on and I watched it, and the characters were just so engaging and everything that I just really got into the story. That was, of course, Robotech at the time.
This all happened because of a fish head. There was a song at the time called Fish Heads, and it played on children's radio, and my brother and my sister and I really liked it. And my mother was out shopping one day, and she was at a bookstore, and they had a comic book on sale, and it had a giant fish head on the cover. And she thought, that's really funny, I'll buy it for my kids. It was actually Comico, it was a comic company at the time, it was their adaptation of Robotech the Macross Saga issue 4. And it has on the cover Rick, as he's called there, and Min-May, and the tuna fish head that he manages to rescue in that episode that they decide to cook. And it's them sitting there morose, looking at the fish head, and my mom thought, haha, funny, and bought it. And we thought, haha, funny, and read it, and we thought, what is this? Buy us more, Mom.
When I was in 6th, 7th grade, Robotech came out, and it just kind of flipped a switch with me. Right about that age is kind of when you're going through puberty and a lot of things are changing with you. And I think the thing that really struck me about Robotech was it had more adult themes than anything else I was watching at the time. And I guess it just hit right at the right time, right? So I'm going through those changes. I'm getting more adult themes, and it made me feel more grown up watching that show.
A friend of mine in high school, we were in art class together, and I would always draw the Veritech planes from Robotech. And what he would do is just look at it, he's like, so you like Robotech? And I'm like, yeah, of course, who doesn't? And he's like, well, what else do you like? So I started naming off all these series, and he's like, you're an anime fan. And I honestly had no idea what that meant. The following week, actually, he came back with a ton of videotapes that his brother made for him, because his brother was actually stationed in Japan. And it blew me away, because I've seen things I had never seen in animation before. Nudity, everything else, and including Macross. And mind you, I didn't even know what Macross was. And he's like, well, it's Robotech. And I saw it and I was just amazed.
I've always, since I was a little girl, read science fiction and fantasy, and my husband and I were going to science fiction conventions. And generally you would find this dark room off in a corner somewhere, a video room where they would be screening these programs that were cartoons that weren't in English. And yeah, that's pretty much how we got into it. And then we started seeing similar things on TV in English, Robotech being the big one. There was a Captain Harlock show and some other things like that. It wasn't until then that we realized some of the things that we watched when we were very small children, like Astro Boy, were actually Japanese in origin.
The unique thing about Macross is it was a big hit in Japan. And most anime at that time ran on television, and that was it. They were gone and you never saw them again. Macross and one or two other shows, like the Studio Ghibli films, were so successful in Japan that they put them out on Laserdisc. You could actually get a good quality copy. Plus they had a lot of merchandise that stayed on the market, as opposed to something that came out for while the show was on. So by the time the show was over, the merchandise was gone. Macross, for years and years afterwards, you could pick things up. And of course, where it really resonated for American fans is when it became part of Robotech.
I was probably 9, and then my siblings were 6 or 7 at the time. And we watched cartoons on TV when we could. We actually didn't watch as many as other kids because we had music school on Saturdays. So we lucked out. Robotech was on at 7 a.m. on Saturday mornings and 7:30 on Sundays, so before music school and before church. We didn't even have a VCR at the time, so we actually had to be up at that time to watch it, and we are not morning children. We never have been, so that was just amazing. My mother never understood why so much trouble getting us up for school, but Robotech.
It made me feel more it got me outside of the whole schoolwork thing. It got me out of the whole home life thing. For at least 30 minutes, I was just sitting there, and I felt like I was a part of something. I felt, and so did my brothers, we all felt like we were a part of something. We would sit there and, you know, hum the theme song when it's on, like right when it comes on, and sure enough, when the story starts, everybody's like, shh, you know, and it was great.
When I watched Robotech and I saw major characters like Roy being killed off in the stories, I mean, that was something that you just didn't see in animated programs in the US.
My mother actually approved of it much more than other shows because she liked, there's so many shows out there that have, you know, war situations, but they're not realistic, and the fact that there were casualties on this show, that they got brought up, not just main character deaths, which of course is amazing, but they'd actually tell you, you know, X number of civilians died, we took this many losses. That impressed her, and so she definitely didn't discourage us watching it because she always felt that we needed to know, you know, more about the real costs of war.
I was so used to watching like G.I. Joe or even Bugs Bunny for that matter, where, you know, no one really got killed. Whereas in anime, people actually died, and it was kind of traumatic.
I think some of the things that attracted me to anime were the storylines, some very complex storylines. It wasn't just episodic stuff. There was a continuing storyline from episode to episode to episode.
For me and my sister, we were just amazed, wow, there are romances on TV. So of course we got really into the Rick, Min-Mei, Lisa triangle and taking sides on that.
Just better stories than anything we were getting on American TV, even live action at the time.
The look of that show really kind of spurred me to get into drawing, right? And so how I actually got into art was mimicking the look of the show. I mean, I remember, you know, we would record it, you know, VCR every day so we could watch it when we got home from school. And what we would do is we would pause frames of it and put paper up on the TV screen so that we could trace, you know, and that's really how I learned to draw. I work a lot with technology. The things I notice in anime is like a lot of the technical things, like when they do, you know, they really do these creative interfaces, right? So like if someone's in a robot, you know, they got this interface in front of them, and they have, you know, the ability to drag and drop something on screen by touching it or dragging it around. Those things are really cool, and you know, we do a lot of different type of interface work, and as technology is starting to catch up now, it kind of reminds me of a lot of those interfaces and things that I always thought were on the cutting edge back in the day when I was watching Robotech, because I actually kind of have the ability to design some of those things now.
Unlike a lot of people who would get something that was copied off a copy off a copy, I wanted to see really how it was done, what techniques they were using, so I was buying the Japanese laser discs and analyzing very carefully. And because of this, people started saying, well, you ought to run a club so other people can see this. And I said, well, sure, if someone else will organize it, I'll be glad to. And of course, I ended up running the club because the other people flaked out. And through that, I met John Ledford, who was running a store in downtown Houston and renting Japanese animation. At the same time, I actually was working for a company in Houston that primarily sold electronics to NASA. But I had talked them into, since they had a retail front, oh, let's start buying these laser discs so I can supplement my own collection and at the same time rent them out. And I had solved some of the rental problems. So John had heard about what I was doing in my club, and everyone said, you two guys need to link up.
If you had told me, you know, when I was in high school or college that I was going to end up working with Japanese cartoons, the plan was never there. But once we started getting into the anime and looking for it, Matt Greenfield was running a club in town. Then we started going to that once a month and watching the anime with it. So when he and John founded the company, they were like, you want to help? And we were like, oh, yes, please.
I was working as a programmer at the time, and I felt very secure in that, made a decent salary and everything, but I've always felt like you should do what you enjoy as opposed to, you know, trying to get a big paycheck. I wanted to do what I enjoyed, and this is what I really enjoyed, and I still love it.
I was working for Mr. Ledford when he owned the Japanese video game company, Gametronics. And like I said, I had a ton of videotapes, and I would show them to John, and we would just sit down and watch these things all night long sometimes. And he was very interested in it. and he really wanted to get the rights to these things. And he didn't know exactly how to do it until Mr. Matt Greenfield walked right through our doors, basically. I want to say it was almost fate.
It was just instant. We both had the exact same ideas. We knew exactly what it was about anime that was appealing to fans at the time, and we both agreed that the companies that were releasing at the time really didn't see the whole picture.
Sure enough, that's how ADV got started, basically.
Really surprised how big it's gotten. We never anticipated it would become as huge as it has. We thought it would be a really successful business, and if we were doing well, we would lose a title a month, and that would be huge. And now, of course, there's a television channel, and we're co-producing a lot of shows and live action films. It's amazing.
I really love what I do. And I think that's very important.
This is a hobby where I get paid, and I love it. I love to go out and meet people and talk to people about anime.
It's the honest truth that Macross influenced my life in a very disturbing manner. Here was the show that changed my life, that put me on this anime path, that helped me get the job that I have today, and my name is now in the DVD credits. How did that happen? So, it's really crazy, and I can really trace all that back to that fish head cover. It's kind of weird.
Why is this series important? Well, I can tell you why it's important to me. I mean, it's the catalyst that brought my awareness of anime and got me into viewing this whole new way of telling stories. The characters were so captivating that it brought a lot of people together. A lot of clubs formed up after seeing Robotech and Macross and all. And it just, it brought people together. And once we had enough people together, we kind of had a critical mass to, bring off anime fandom that we have today. I mean, it's really what brought a lot of fans together and kicked off the whole process of what we have today in the anime world.